All right. So this is just a sample shoe that I pulled online. Um, the size it came already as 300, and it's pretty big. So that's good. What I want to do is we went over the pen tool last time. So the first thing I'm going to do with this shoe is I'm going to unlock this background layer by just double clicking it and just letting it name itself. And the next thing I want to do is actually isolate this off of the white background. So going back to Karina's question about what's the best kind of type of shoe image to get for this project is going to be something on a white background. Otherwise, if there is a background on here with buildings or whatnot, it's going to be a little more difficult to pull the shoe off of that background. So really the easiest way to do it is get your magic wand tool and really adjust the tolerance. Give it a little bit more tolerance if it's like a really stark white like this. And then just click the white area, and you can see that it's basically a pretty good selection. I actually maybe selected too much. It was too much of a tolerance on there because I have some of this reflection area being selected. So I'm just going to Command D to deselect that. And I'm going to go up to my tolerance again, and I'm just going to cut it in half to 30. And then when I click again with my wand tool in the white area, it's better. It's not perfect. So I'm just going to try it one more time. I'll bring it down to 15 this time. And that's pretty good. So, it maintains the shadow here, so it's not going to select the shadow, which is good. And it's getting right up close to the edge of the shoe all the way around. I'm not seeing any pieces of shoe that I don't want to be selected, maybe except for this little kind of string on the shoe, if you will. So what I can do is if I go to my menus down here, you can kind of turn on and off this masking preview. So if I click this little icon, it's my mask preview button. And I click on it and I can see that whatever is red in the image is selected. So it's just the same idea as the marching ants, except it's a little bit more visual. And what you can do with this is you can adjust your selection by using a brush tool and an eraser tool. So right now I pressed B and I selected my brush. And again, with a brush, you can use your left and right brackets to adjust the size without having to go up into your menu over here. And then I can just kind of color in this little piece here that I'm missing that I want to select. And I can look around and see if there's any areas that I don't want selected that are currently selected, or vice versa. So, like this little piece here, I can erase, if I have like this big chunk selected here and I don't want it selected, what I could do is take my eraser tool, which is E, and that's really huge, so I'm going to use my left bracket to make it smaller. And then I can actually like erase this, and it kind of, it will deselect it. See? So I'm turning my preview on and off, and you can see like what Photoshop is considering a selection based on my brush strokes. So I'm going to bring my opacity to 100% on this eraser brush. And then just kind of clean up the edge. And I'll be good with that. That's kind of what's selected. So I'm going to go to my Move tool. I'm going to click on that. And then I'm just going to press Delete. And I'm going to press Command D, which is going to deselect everything. So I'm going to actually add a background layer here, and I'm going to drag it down in my layers palette. And I'm going to press Command A because I want to fill this with a color so I can kind of see still what I'm doing. You know, it's hard for me to see on this checkered background. So I'm going to go to Edit Fill, and I'm just going to pick a random color here. Do something like that. I'm going to deselect it. Doing this can kind of help too in seeing that, oh, you know, I can kind of identify that I have like a kind of a, you know, a rough edge here that needs to be maybe feathered a little bit, meaning, you know, the pixels are going to kind of blend rather than be just a very hard stop on the edges. So that helps kind of preview it a little bit. What I want to do next is I want to separate the shadow off of the shoe, because when I place this into InDesign, I'm going to want to do one thing to the... Was that an intercom or something?
Attention, students, staff, and faculty. I have been informed that there is a severe thunderstorm warning in our vicinity. If you can stay indoors, it would be very beneficial. So it's passes. We will try to give you more information as time goes on.
All right, so it's beneficial to stay indoors right now. So I am going to use my pen tool. You can use a lot of different tools, and it may, you know what, maybe I'm not going to use my pen tool. Maybe there's something better. What I'm going to do is actually use my magnetic lasso tool and see if that'll work. This tool I didn't show you last time. I showed you the lasso and the polygon lasso, which is basically just another way to select something. But the magnetic lasso, you can actually click on an edge, and it will kind of auto-detect the edge that you want. So it's really it's finding the difference between the edge of the pixels that you're tracing, and really just auto detects. You can actually click on it to kind of guide it along, but you can see it's just kind of working with me a little bit, so I don't have to be so precise with it. I can hit the space bar, and my icon's going to turn into a hand, and I can just drag along without deselecting the tool. And this is actually working pretty well for this kind of application. So I'm going over this, letting the lasso kind of do the work. Going around here to this darker area, clicking just so I can kind of tell the software, you know, give it some idea of what I'm trying to do here. All right, so once I get done with that, come back and finish the path at the beginning where I started. And then I'm just going to really click in this layer area. I'm going to option click it, and I'm going to drag it down. And then so I have basically 2 layers of shoes here, the exact same thing, but on the top layer I want to erase the shoe, and on the underneath layer I want to erase, no, on the top layer I want to erase the shadow, and on the bottom layer I want to erase the shoe. So I can separate the shadow and the shoe on 2 different layers. So for the top layer, which I have selected here, it's kind of highlighted, I'm going to just click V and delete. V means the move tool, basically. And then with my selection still there on the top layer, I'm just going to click the bottom layer, and then I'm just going to, this is one of my more favorite keyboard shortcuts, which is Command-Shift-I, and then that's to select the inverse. So just to show you again that we don't really have those marching ants around here at all. And when I turn my preview on, I can see what is being selected and what is not. And now when I do Command-Shift-I, you can see that my selection is inversed. And I'm just showing you that via this that preview mode there. So there I just deleted that, so that deleted the shoe layer. and then kept the shadow separate from the shoe. And at this point, let's say my magazine had a blue background on every page. I can go into the layering options here for that layer, and then I could just click on multiply. And multiply is a really quick shortcut if you have something that's on a white background, like a shadow, obviously. You can just hit multiply and it's going to kind of make it look like it's actually on that background pretty flawlessly. Let's say, for instance, I had both of the shoe and the shadow on the same layer, and I'll just do multiply on the shoe. That's what it's going to look like. So multiply is really beneficial to you for the shadows of the shoes. So now I have really a shoe on its own layer, a shadow on the other. I'm just going to name them. I'll call this shoe 1, shadow. You only have to do that once for the shoes, cutting the shadow off. But now I'm going to kind of show you how to recolor this shoe in a very easy way. So what we're going to do then is duplicate this shoe layer. So to do that, I just did an Alt, click and drag, move that new layer up. I'll rename it shoe 2. I'm going to turn this middle shoe 1 layer off. So now you can't really see anything happening on the screen because the shoes are exactly the same, but I have two shoe layers, one on top of the other. And so for shoe 2, that's going to kind of bring me into showing you what destructive editing, color editing is. And there's 2 types of color editing. There's non-destructive, and then there's destructive. And really, the only difference between the 2 is non-destructive maintains the original artwork on the layer. Destructive will edit the layer that you're working on permanently. Excuse me. What I mean by permanently is moving forward it's going to be different all the time, but if you kind of go back into your history, and click back in time, all the way to the beginning, you can still save that that version if you wanted to go back. The reason why people use one over the other is really ease of use, being able to turn the layer on and off, to try different effects and experiment without permanently changing the original artwork. Sometimes my workaround, because I like to use destructive color editing, is I'll just click and drag a layer and make a new one, destroy it, change it as much as I need to. If it doesn't work, I'll just trash the layer and start from the beginning again. So first I'll show you the destructive color editing. So I have shoe 2, I'm going to duplicate this again, and this is going to be kind of like my just kind of my experimental layer. So what you could do is go up to Image and Adjustments, and then you go down to this Replace Color option. And so Replace Color, this palette here, can everyone see it okay? Pretty good. So this here, I have this kind of preview box. And what my preview box is doing is showing me in negative what color I have selected on my layer. So if I click on this red patch here, you can see that Photoshop is saying, yep, this is the area that I have selected, or I'm going to replace color in. I can hold the Shift key, and you can see that my little eyedropper then has like this plus sign next to it when I hold the Shift key down. And this means that I'm going to add more color tones to my selection depending on where I click out here, right? So if I go to like the lightest part and click, then that's going to click a lot of this shoe. If I keep clicking, it's kind of filling in a little by little there. So essentially what I'm doing is just selecting the color that I want to replace in the image. I can adjust sort of the pixels that I've selected out there. Like see, for instance, here I have too much of this black soul selected, right? You know what? Let me show you a color change really quick. So I picked like this teal blue, right? So then I just changed the whole shoe like that. So what you can do with this box down here basically is just click on it, whatever you have selected, and pick a color that you want to replace the color with. You know, and it's just kind of doing all the work for you. So you can refine the effect by using this Fuzziness tool. So what this is doing very slowly is expanding the intensity, I guess, of the color replacement, or reducing the intensity of the color replacement. So if I bring it all the way up, you can see that now my sole is starting to become a little bit green. And when I bring it all the way down, it's really just looks kind of terrible. And it's not selecting all of the tones. So if you bring it somewhere in the middle, you can find kind of the sweet spot. Like that. And then go from there. What I want to do maybe is deselect some of this, because this green is really bothering me. So if I wanted to deselect some of the pixels that I already have selected in my Replace Color tool, I can hit the Alt key and hold that down, and it creates like this minus sign. So plus is Shift, Alt is minus. And if I hit Alt and click, that's going to start deselecting some of like the color tones in this image. Now it looks like, I'll shift click it again. Looks like it's going to be pretty difficult for me to edit that without, which is fine. So in this instance, and every case is different, what I'm going to do is just hit OK, and then I'm going to go into my image, and thankfully I have another layer saved, so I'm just going to Alt click and drag this out, turn it on. So this is kind of like my black sole layer, if you will, right? Or the black, what do you call that? Sole, basically, of a shoe. So I have that layer turned on and showing with my little eye symbol there. And I'm going to zoom in and click on my green shoe. And then I'm just going to kind of take my pen tool and just trace this thing out. And again, you could use any kind of selection tool you want. I came from an illustration background, so I do use the pen tool quite a bit. It's my favorite tool just because it gives me a lot of flexibility and control over my lines. And so I'll make, so again, we went over this last time, but I completed the path with a pen tool. I clicked on my paths tab here in my palette, and then I just clicked on this More Options menu here in the Paths palette, and then I hit Make Selection, and then here again is where I would adjust the feather of my edge, and I want a sharp edge, so it's going to be at 0. And then I'm going to hit V and delete. So then I'm going to deselect it, and now I have like a clean shoe, right? So I have my shoe number 2, and that was created by destructive editing. And I have my sole layer here. What I can do is actually select both of these and do and then press Control click, and then I can actually just merge these layers together right down here. So I did that by selecting both layers. I'll just show you again. I selected both layers with a shift click. I hit Control click, and then I hit merge layers. So now that's my second shoe. I don't want to do that though. I want to keep the sole separate because I want to make a third shoe. And then simply I can just click and drag shoe 2 up, rename it shoe 3. And then now what I'm going to do is do non-destructive editing, color editing to this layer. And so what it's going to be is I'm going to go up to image adjustments. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It's going to be layer adjustments. New adjustment layer. And then here are all the options that I can choose from. So since we're doing like a color change, I'm going to go in hue saturation. And now it's going to ask me to name a layer. So the difference between destructive and non-destructive is non-destructive is going to have me create a layer to where I can make all these options or all these color changes, and then I can turn it on and off. So what it did here was created a hue saturation layer. Gave me this dialog box. This dialog box here is going to, for the hue saturation option, is going to allow me to change the shoe image via these sliders. So let me just bring it to like this kind of crazy color. It's changing the color of the background too, because this layer here actually affects all layers beneath it. So I'm going to turn this background off and bring these two, actually I'll keep them up front, like that. So I mean, that looks pretty good. So I don't know if it's, yeah, I mean, I think that looks fine. And that was kind of, you can adjust the saturation. That's really just the intensity of the color. You can bring it down, muddy it up a little bit, bring it up, make it way too bright, even almost neon. Lightness and darkness, you know, typical what it's going to do for all the for that option, just as you would in the normal editing tools. So then that's it. Again, the benefit of this is I can turn this on and off to kind of see, oh, maybe that's not a good color to use. Maybe I'll do something else. Okay, so let's do something else. So what I did was I alt-click and dragged the hue saturation adjustment layer. And now I have two of them on. I'm going to turn the back one off, and I'm going to double-click this little box here then, and then I'm going to try like a different color. Maybe something like that. So you know, the benefit of this is, you know, I can kind of look at my art and experiment a little bit without losing any of that information. So if I say to myself, you know, this looks great, that's what I want my shoe to look like, I'm just going to actually select all of these layers together, Control-click, and merge the layers. And then now this is, I took that adjustment layer, compressed it down with the other layers of the shoe, and then I just will have my third shoe. Oop, yeah. All right. So that's pretty much how I would say 90%, 99% of your shoes will probably be color corrected, because A, it's super easy, and B, it looks like, I mean, it literally looks like this shoe is like how we found the photo originally. So next steps for that, let me see. So I have 1, 2, I'll delete this layer. Typically I don't like to delete too many layers because sometimes I want to go back. So I have 3 different color shoes, all named accordingly. Let me go ahead and file save this. Oh, 1 second. What I usually do is go to select. I'm sorry. Go to layer. I'm sorry again. Image trim. I want to trim these transparent pixels so it's like perfectly cropped to the exact shoe size. The reason why I do this is because when I place it in InDesign, it's going to make it much easier. So I'm just going to save it as a Photoshop file, a layered Photoshop file, so I can then come back and place this into my shoe layout. All right. Is there any questions at this point on any of that stuff? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the purpose for that is really just to demonstrate your mastery of Photoshop as a photo editing tool. Yeah. So you know, we saw that this shoe, it's very, I mean, it's got like maybe 2, 3 colors. You know, if we look at it with like kind of a more limited palette, this one maybe has a little bit more. And again, you can use your tools, you know, how you see fit to cut these shoes out and customize them in any way. What I would do is actually look at the design of the shoe and maybe say, uh, um, like there's an element on this shoe that I'm going to want to change in all the different color schemes of shoes. So, you know, cut this piece out and separate it out from everything else, and just keep it as its own element. So I'll copy this, paste it on its new layer. Okay. And then, so every shoe that I create, I can just, you know, color change this little check mark and apply it as a duplicate to another layer, right? So, or another shoe. And I'll just call it like a template, just so I don't have to keep selecting the same thing over and over again. If I know I'm going to change it over and over again, it doesn't make sense for me to just keep making, you know, or keep selecting it. I might as well select it once and keep it as like my template, and then open it back up and manipulate it later on for another shoe. And a lot of this is just turning layers on and off, and just building your shoes out. So here's my original shoe, and you can certainly keep your original shoe. You don't have to change the colors of all the shoes, but if you want all of the shoes to be the original, you can. Just as long as you photo edit the other versions of the shoe. So here's my shoe 1, and that's done. Let's call it done. Shoe 2, I can just go to image adjustments again, replace color. I'll click on this image. See, now it gets a little more complicated with more of the, you know, kind of a wider gamut of colors here in the shoe, but still this tool is good enough to where I can click and see that my selection is growing here based on what I'm picking, and then kind of tweak the colors, you know, to however I feel like it looks good, and kind of go from there. Right, so maybe I'll say okay on that, and then I'll apply the filter again. Keep forgetting where that's at. Replace color, and then I'll start with, you know, I'll start selecting the grays. Then maybe I'll give it more fuzziness so we can see more of a reaction to it. I'm not seeing too much there. It doesn't really look like a real shoe at that point. But maybe I need to select more of the pixels, you know. So I'll hit OK here, and then see, I'll hit a shift click and start to pick out some of the pixels a little bit more. I'll increase the fuzziness to expand the selection or kind of limit it. I don't know how different that is from the original. Yeah. So something like that. So that could be like your second shoe, if you will. I guess I can go into a little bit more of these options. So more of the destructive editing options. You can get to all of them through image and adjustments, and it just goes, you know, down the line. So brightness contrast is an option that's really going to make adjust the brightness of your image. As you can see there, contrast is going to increase the variation between light and dark. So I'm going to keep brightness to 0, keep contrast up all the way, and you can see it's really kind of intense right now. And then when I bring it all the way down, it's kind of a little bit more in the, you know, mid-tone, neutral, kind of muddy area. So I mean, even just this this is a really powerful kind of option. So even just a little boost of a contrast, and I have my little preview box here, and I can turn it on and off, and you can see that, you know, it can really affect an image a lot, even with like maybe a 30 increase. You know, even some of that subtle stuff can really have a big effect on some of your images. Another destructive editing option is levels. And actually, let me fill my background with white, just so it's not checkered like that. Under adjustments, levels is another kind of option that is great for increasing or decreasing contrast. So this slider here represents all of the darks in the darker tones in the spectrum of colors within the image. Here are all the brighter pixels, and here's everything in the middle. So you know, to make your darks darker, you can just drag this slider over, and you can see that all of my dark tones are really getting intensified, and the brights I can do the same. So this is the same idea as increasing contrast, but this is at a little more, gives you maybe a little bit more control, I think, over that. And then your midtones, you can go either way. You can go towards give a little more of the dark, and then give a little more of the bright. You know, so this is something that people will just typically open up a file, come in here, and just drag the darks up a little bit where you see that spike, and then bring the brights a little bit where you start to see it increase just ever so slightly, and then, you know, it makes a big difference. I mean, this is a professional, you know, photo, and it's just kind of increases the contrast a little bit. If you like contrast, which I do a lot of, then that's kind of a good go-to. And typically, you'll just bring photos in and just start adjusting things every time you work with photos. So this is another, again, kind of a contrast adjustment palette, and this one's called Curves. So what it does is this is generally actually pretty much the same kind of waveform, if you will, in the background that you've seen in the Levels palette. You saw that big spike, and then you saw that kind of hill, and then kind of tapers down from there. This is a little bit more of a visual palette, so you can see your dark spectrum over here, your bright spectrum over there. And then what you can do on this little line here is click to add points. And so what the points are going to do when you click on them is enable you to drag sort of different, kind of finding that mid-tone balance between light and dark, and make that adjustment. So again, I clicked on the line again, and I'm going to kind of increase the brights on the darker side of the spectrum, which looks pretty bad, so I'm going to decrease those. And then I'm going to move this line over here like that a little bit. So again, it's just another way to increase or decrease contrast in midtones in an image. And again, just like every other destructive palette that you have, you can turn on and off your previews just to see what the difference you've made is. Is it too much? So on and so forth. There's a lot of tools here within this palette. It looks like they've added to some of these auto correction options. So I would, you're not hurting anything by just looking around here and kind of picking things that might work best for you. You don't always have to, change things by hand and so on. So I'm going to hit cancel. Actually, here's something that might be of use to you. Every time you're in one of these menus and you made a bunch of changes that you're not really happy with, and you don't want to hit OK because you know you want to make that adjustment, you can hold the Alt-Option key for both the Mac and the PC, and then you can see that this little button goes from cancel to reset, and you can really just reset the artwork and then start from scratch again. With any of these menus, it does that. Okay. Moving down here, exposure. This is, man, I am not going to walk in. I'm going to get soaked by the time I walk to my car. So this exposure, if you overexpose a picture, if you're going for that look, I mean, if your brand calls for a photo to look overexposed, in your design, that would be a very cool tool to use, So that's essentially that. I am not a photographer, so I'm sure the photographers in here will, probably be able to benefit a lot more from actually those top 4 options. Vibrance, I never typically use, and I'm not even really quite sure what it does. It's just going to adjust my saturation, really, which, my go-to is the hue saturation menu, which I kind of just demonstrated to you earlier. It's just going to, tweak the hues within the shoe. You can adjust the lightness or the saturation of it. Sometimes too much saturation makes it look obvious. Again, like an obvious Photoshop job. You can preview this, which is very helpful. There's also a colorize option too, which will just totally flood the image with like a tone of color, to which you can, again, increase or decrease the saturation of that tone of color, just like that. So. Alright, so some photo filter. These are, just your normal photo filters that you would throw on something. They're here as a destructive editing option. You can even, increase or decrease the density of the filter, which is helpful. These are more professional filters towards the top. Otherwise, you can just choose color and just, again, very much like colorizing an image in the hue saturation palette. You can do the same thing here. And if you're not happy with it, of course, Alt or Option hold and then click this cancel. What was the cancel button? Now it's reset. When I click that Alt Option key, you can just go back to the original state. Okay, let's see. Gradient map is one that's kind of interesting. You know, if you want something to look like, I don't know, like an Andy Warhol or something, you could probably use this type of thing. What it actually does is it actually takes like the darks and light tones of a photo and applies colors to a specified gradient that you choose or create. Um, so again, you can hit that. It's going to default to one of these options here. You can pick one. Let's see, you can actually, by clicking on the gradient bar itself, you can go into here and kind of then adjust the slider to the gradient. So here I'm taking the oranges and making them more intense on that end of the spectrum, and here on the other. I can click out here and add another color into the mix here. So that's what this little square piece is doing. If I click on this little triangle at the top of it, then I can pick even yet another color to add to the gradient map. So you know, you can apply this to any kind of whatever image you want. You can actually drag these out and just delete them all together if you're not you know, feeling these colors. So that's another option you can use. And again, if you option kind of click the reset button, it'll go back to what it originally was. Yeah, that's, you know, these other tools I don't really use too much. I mean, selective color actually, I take that back, is one that I will typically use a lot of. If I have an image, let's see, something that has more. I'll go with this. I'll go with this image here. So what I'll do is show you this. Where's my? Oops. Oh, goodness. Here we go. All right. So I have my layer selected. I need to adjust. So selective color. Basically, will zero in on the RGB colors or the CMYK colors that make up an image. RGB being the digital colors, and then CMYK being ink. But you can see here that this image has a lot of yellow. So I can actually target the yellow here in this menu by clicking yellows. And now I can see that I have these color sliders here where I can increase or decrease the amount of magenta within this yellow tone area here. So let me see here. Oh, I got my preview. Oh, it looks like it's yellow, but I guess it's not. Let's target the blue. There we go. There's more blue. So yeah, you know, it's going to look at every single pixel in the image, and it's just going to say, okay, what am I targeting? Now, what am I doing with my target? Am I decreasing the cyan? Am I increasing the magenta? And so on and so forth. So I can then suck out all of the cyan. I can take out all of the magenta pixels from the cyan pixels. I can take out all of the yellow and all of the black, which is there's very few. You can barely see that change, but it's mostly in this area here. That's pretty useful if you wanted to add, like, what have I used that for? If I wanted to add like more like pigmentation to like skin tones or something. If I wanted to make someone look more tan or vice versa. If I wanted to make grass greener in an image, you would just go up there into the adjustments and target the green pixels and give it a little more yellow and a little more blue, cyan and yellow. You would use a menu like that. And that's kind of just scratching the surface of all of these different options. It's going to be all about you all getting in there and really experimenting with them. Your shoes don't necessarily, have to look realistic. If you wanted to do a gradient map on a shoe, that's fine with me. If you wanted like a group of your shoes to be just all these different like rainbow colors of gradient map, that's totally cool. I would encourage you to try and make it look realistic, but I'm not going to knock you for it because honestly, the goal of this course is not to make everything look like it could be sold on a shelf at a store. It's just to demonstrate that you understand the tools and use them. So, okay, so let's take a break then, and then because I think it stopped raining, and if